everyone. Bonjour, bienvenue. Welcome to the National Managers Community Symposium virtual talk this Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. My name is Marianne Mederick. I am the NMC Regional Lead for Ontario, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ellen LaRose, Regional Lead for the National Capital Region. Together, we're very excited to bring you this virtual talk on compassionate conversations around COVID-19. Please note that our event today will be recorded and a YouTube video link will be made available following our session. For the best possible experience, we encourage you to disconnect from your VPN. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and ask questions by using the Q&A feature in the language of your choice. You can vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please note that your cameras and mics are automatically disabled. We will begin this event by acknowledging that we're meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. In particular, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Ojibwe Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the land of which you work, live, and play. Today, we're very excited to have panelists Beverly and Morris, Sylvain Lefebvre, and Jean-François Claude with us today to share best practices on how to navigate challenging conversations associated with the pandemic. These are challenging times for everyone, especially you as managers. We now have a vaccine directive, and some employees may be required to return to the workplace. You as managers will most likely be the ones talking with employees who are feeling anxious about the vaccine, about returning to the office, and some may not understand why they need to return when they've been working effectively from home. These great panelists will provide tips on how to communicate and navigate through these challenging conversations. First, I'd like to formally introduce Beverly Ann Morris, EAP Coordinator-Counsellor from the Cbsa Employee Assistance Program. Beverly is a registered certified Canadian counselor with the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association. She has a Master of Counseling from the University of Ottawa and has worked in the EAP since 2010. Having had 10 years experience in the private sector, she was very excited to join the federal government in May of this year. Beverly, given your expertise in the mental health field, and as a mental health clinician, can you give our managers some tips on how to communicate with employees or support employees who are struggling with the idea of returning to the workplace or dealing with the stress of the pandemic, including the vaccine mandate?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Marianne, for that introduction and for the question. So I think I would start first by encouraging managers to use their listening skills to really hear their employees. As we can all attest, the pandemic has lasted well beyond what we imagined it would. And it's created this new reality where we seem to be having to adjust to new norms repeatedly. So this is going to require managers help their employees adjust to the changes that they need to face by engaging them in open and transparent dialogue. So this can sometimes be, it might be viewed by some as opening the proverbial can of worms, or some managers may struggle with the idea that staff may have, emotional reactions to the idea of yet another change. What I would say to that is that it's important to realize that emotions are a natural and typical reaction to life, especially to life changes. And as human beings, that is something we all share in common. So I encourage managers to try your best to show empathy for what your employees might be feeling and to try to validate their perceptions, even if it's not yours, even if it differs completely from where you need them to be. Research has shown that in validating and being empathetic, we can in fact help de-escalate emotional responses. So how do we show empathy? Well, there's a really good video on YouTube by Brené Brown on empathy versus sympathy. I really invite you all to check it out if you haven't already. What this video says is that empathy involves feeling and connecting with another person. So sympathy is different because with sympathy, we tend to want to help the other person. We're trying to find a solution for them, or we're trying to help them feel better. And empathy is a little bit different. It's about connecting with some lived experience that you have as a person that could relate to the situation that the other person is describing to you. So rarely do they actually need a solution from you. Connection is what will help your employees to feel understood. So for example, for an example of empathy, would be, for example, if someone says to you, my marriage is falling apart and I don't know what to do. So being empathetic would look like, I'm so sorry to hear that. It must feel so sad to be in that place in your marriage. So this would be because you would remember a time when you might have been in a similar situation in your relationship, remembering a breakup. And also, if you haven't gone through that, you can imagine that, being in a place where you feel like your marriage is falling apart, they're going to feel sad. The chances are they're not happy and ecstatic about that, right? Another example, if somebody says, oh, I'm afraid of taking the vaccine and I also don't want to lose my job. So empathy can look like, I can't even imagine how scared you must be feeling. I don't know what to say. I'm here for you. I'm here to listen. And this is going to create that sort of connection that the person is likely seeking. Validation. What does validation look like? So validation means listening to and accepting the expressed emotions of the person without judgment. So for validation to work, it needs to be genuine and it needs to be free from your own perspective. So this looks something like, wow, John, I can understand how you feel given the circumstances you've gone through. Or, when you explain it like that with all the things that are coming up for you, I can understand you feeling frustrated. Anyone might be frustrated in those circumstances. So it's really about listening and just accepting the way that they feel about the situation and saying, yeah, I get how you feel. I really understand that. It makes sense given the context. So once you've validated and empathized and listened, it's going to be important to ask your employees specific questions about what they might feel or what they're thinking about their situation and help guide them to a resource. So in the example of returning to work, explain what information you have as transparently as you can. So again, you're not trying to find a solution for them. It's more about listening to them. And it can be really helpful to say, yeah, we're living in certain times and it can be stressful to navigate. So how can I help? Ce serait important de guider vos employés à travers ce moment d'incertitude en leur demandant quels sont les faits de leur situation présente. Que savons-nous du mandat de vaccination ou du retour au bureau? Les aider à voir que le retour au bureau demande un ajustement de contexte dans lequel ils ont travaillé pendant les 2 dernières années. Ce ne sera pas un nouvel emploi, mais un autre contexte, ce qui devrait prendre un peu plus de temps pour s'ajuster, mais le contexte du bureau est aussi familier pour la plupart des gens parce qu'on a travaillé avant la pandémie dans les bureaux. Donc, il s'agit vraiment de les aider à comprendre que ce serait un ajustement et qu'ils sont capables de l'affronter comme ils ont fait en mars 2020. Il est aussi important de vous souvenir, de vous rappeler que tout le monde aura des besoins différents. Et donc, il sera important pour vous de prendre chaque employé où il est. et de prendre compte de chaque contexte quand il vient vers vous. Il se pourrait que certaines soient angoissées par le retour au bureau. Essayez d'écouter les inquiétudes sans jugement et partager avec eux l'information que vous avez de façon franche le plus possible. C'est sûr que parfois, on ne peut pas tout dire, mais je vous encouragerais de dire tout ce qui est possible pour vous à dire. So, if your team has not had a planning meeting around going back to work or returning to the office, if it's possible for them to have some sort of flexibility in the return to work model, I encourage you to invite them to have a meeting, have a staff meeting amongst themselves, let them discuss with their team members what their individual needs are and what they look like. So if there's a possible hybrid model to returning to work, they can see what they might be able to propose to you as a manager. So you'll need to manage their expectations, of course. Not everything that they present to you is going to be actionable, is going to be necessarily what they can receive. But it can help to alleviate some of their stress if they can discuss what might be possible within their own teams. Again, make no promises. This is an exercise for them to share with their teammates and to bring back to managers. When dealing with staff who are not vaccinated, there's a line that has been set by the federal government. And so in your role, offering them an empathetic ear and validating their experience or their beliefs or their circumstances without judgment is going to be the one thing that you can do to help your employees through this piece. Letting them know that you feel for them in the position that they're in and offer them a resource, whether it's the union, I don't know what other resources might be available. Be honest with them that in your role, you are required to abide by the mandate and that it is not personal. Explore options with them if there are any, and suggest that they connect maybe with EAP if they are really struggling and if they're having difficulty moving forward with a decision one way or the other. Ask them what they're willing to do given the deadline and listen to them. I just want to plug really quickly for 30 seconds. Self-care for managers is going to be very, very important because it's a stressful time. So you're actually going to see that you may see that you require more self-care than usual. So try to maintain your boundaries as much as possible. Keep your working hours to what they're supposed to be. Take breaks. Try to manage that work-life balance. Si vous avez des stratégies anti-stress, je vous encourage à les mettre dans vos calendriers et respectez votre temps de bien-être pour votre santé mentale. Ceci est aussi un bon exemple pour vos employés. Merci. Thank you, everyone.
Merci beaucoup, Beverly. Ce sont vraiment d'excellents conseils à retenir dans le but de se préparer à avoir une conversation sur un sujet aussi délicat. Je retiens l'importance de l'empathie, de la validation, puis aussi en tant que gestionnaire, de prendre soin de vous. Vos exemples étaient vraiment excellents. J'aimerais maintenant vous présenter notre prochain panéliste, Sylvain Lefebvre. Sylvain a œuvré comme infirmier dans divers secteurs de la santé, soit plus de 15 ans à l'Institut de cardiologie de Montréal et 20 ans au Service correctionnel du Canada. Il est devenu vite responsable d'une équipe de programmes d'aide aux employés, puis gestionnaire du secteur régional de santé publique et finalement gestionnaire des services de santé dans 2 pénitenciers fédéraux. Voyant qu'il pouvait faire la différence dans son milieu de travail avec ses talents et formation de médiateur, il occupe actuellement un poste de gestionnaire national et de conseiller régional en prévention et gestion des conflits. Par ailleurs, son expertise l'amène aujourd'hui à conseiller la haute gestion sur les mesures à prendre pour améliorer les relations interpersonnelles en milieu de travail. Sylvain, comment les gestionnaires peuvent-ils faire face à des conversations dans lesquelles un employé peut être argumentatif et ne pas vouloir suivre les directives administrées par l'organisation?
Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Nous, sous l'angle de la gestion des conflits, premièrement, on a opté pour non pas avoir des conversations difficiles, mais avoir une conversation sur un sujet difficile. Having a conversation on a difficult topic means that you could have a conversation. We could talk to each other. It's not so difficult between you and me, but the topic that we're going to discuss might be difficult. So I think it's setting the boundaries that it's the topic that we may not agree upon. So, c'est important que la personne déjà en partant soit rassurée sur la bonne relation qui existe déjà entre vous et que le sujet va peut-être être difficile, mais il y a une histoire en arrière de vous qui fait que vous avez pu avoir des conversations efficaces. C'est pour ça qu'on veut se déplacer vers conversation sur un sujet difficile. C'est bien évident que ces conversations-là, on doit se préparer à les avoir, demander du support, se pratiquer s'il le faut pour se sentir bien assis sur une chaise à quatre pattes. If you want to have these kind of conversation, please be prepared. Ask for help, practice yourself, and then when you're going to be in the room, the stress would be having the conversation on this difficult topic, not being in control of what you want to say. Ça, c'est une chose très importante qu'on a remarqué. Et il y a des choses qu'il faut aussi accepter, c'est que vous n'arriverez peut-être jamais à vous entendre ou à convenir de quelque chose dans ce type de conversation-là. Le but doit être d'écouter. Beverly just said that being empathic is nice. It's mandatory in that. And then you're going to have to say, okay, we have to agree that we may not agree. That's the first thing. The other thing is, I need to understand and promote your compliance into that new rule that the government made. So, il faut aussi savoir que le but, c'est de comprendre et de faire la promotion de cette nouvelle règle-là. Ça peut être n'importe quelle décision de gestion qui va à l'encontre d'une attente ou d'un système de valeurs. Et parlant de valeurs, mais c'est sûr que les valeurs personnelles de l'individu, les choix de cet individu-là vont influencer la conversation. Il faut accepter qu'ils sont différents, mais la conversation est sur voici la politique, est-ce qu'on la comprend bien, elle rentre en choc avec tes valeurs, qu'est-ce qu'on fait maintenant? Donc, the policy or decision itself lies outside of your sphere of influence and control. So there's nothing you can do. That has to be clear. I'm only the messenger here. There's nothing that I would be able to modify as an example. So, soyez transparent en les laissant savoir où réside votre capacité d'agir. Et si votre capacité d'agir est restreinte à ça, mais c'est clair, voici ce que moi, je peux faire pour toi. Encore Beverly, ce qu'elle nous a dit, bien voici, je comprends, mais voilà ce que je dois faire. Voici ce qui va arriver si. Et ça va les aider à s'en aller vers prendre une décision éclairée. It will be a well-informed decision if they know all the parameters that they're going to face if they say yes or no, as an example. Le but de ces conversations-là, c'est aussi de maintenir une relation de travail respectueuse et professionnelle. This has to be stated at the beginning of the conversation. My expectation is that we're going to be respectful and we're going to be able to work together, even these decisions. So, et ça, au niveau de la gestion, ça peut vous aider à mettre dans un contexte actuel la conversation. Ça va bien normalement, mais ce petit morceau-là, ici, va peut-être être difficile. Et c'est bien évident que votre rôle, c'est d'appliquer la politique et ne devenez pas sur le mode défense. Don't be defensive about the policy. Just play the role of the one who have to apply it because that's the role you have. The decision have been made and now my role, I'm paid for that. That may help to put the parameters around the conversation. if I can share a step one, the preparation is understand your response, your reaction to the situation. How do I feel with that? Does that will impact the conversation? And knowing yourself, then you will be better prepared. And the other one is how I will manage my emotion if I do have some emotions. What will I do if I get triggered? So, okay, if I get triggered, I will take, okay, I need a pause. I will go back to the rules that we put for the conversation. Si jamais je réagis, c'est bien évident qu'il faut que je me retourne vers comment j'ai organisé la conversation, quel est le but de la conversation. Ce n'est pas de s'entendre, ce n'est pas de défendre nos positions, c'est bien de comprendre la politique et de ses impacts. La deuxième étape, c'est justement de mettre les paramètres, le carré de sable clair de la conversation. Puis ça va vous aider parce que si vous sortez des paramètres, vous pouvez vous ramener tranquillement. Il dit, tu te rappelles, on avait dit que ceci, on n'embarquerait pas dans telle affaire. OK, ouais, tu as raison, parfait. Revenons à l'intérieur des paramètres de la conversation. Il y a aussi de pratiquer l'écoute active. L'écoute active, c'est je t'écoute pour comprendre, c'est pas je t'écoute pour me défendre. Il y a une grosse différence et on a un outil qu'on a développé sur la différence entre un débat, on se rappellera le débat des chefs, et le dialogue. On veut rester dans le dialogue. Je ne veux pas débattre de mon idée. Je veux rester vraiment dans le mode je t'écoute, je comprends. Maintenant, est-ce que tu peux m'écouter et comprendre, s'il te plaît? Fait que tous les deux être dans l'écoute active. C'est sûr que moi, ce que je veux, c'est d'encourager la façon dont on se comprend. Je comprends ta position, tu comprends la mienne, et ça va créer ce que vous vouliez au début, le respectful working relationship. Puis c'est, and people have to acknowledge also that it's beyond your influence and control. So encouraging and understanding is one of the steps. Step 5, planifier les prochaines étapes. Ask them how they see the future following the conversation. Don't try to find solution for them, as Beverly already said. Okay, now that you fully understand the policy, what you going to do with that, knowing the impact of your choice. And of course, there's the what if. Et s'il arrivait telle chose? Les émotions sont normales, comme Beverly a dit. Si vous êtes prête à gérer vos émotions, à les reconnaître, faites pareil. Ne jugez pas l'émotion. L'important, c'est de mettre les paramètres nécessaires pour que les émotions soient exprimées avec des comportements acceptables en milieu de travail. Et on peut faire un rappel de dire, je comprends ton émotion, je comprends ta colère, but I would like you to be more calm. Could you speak less loud? Et ça, je pense que on se fait rassurant. On ne réagit pas à la colère de l'autre. Si les comportements sont inacceptables, on les nomme, on demande le comportement attendu et par la suite, on passe à l'action si jamais les gens débordent. C'est triste, on va arrêter la conversation et voilà. Et après ça, if you get stuck and you may need an exit strategies, be ready. If you say, okay, what if I get stuck here or here? Just think about what would be your strategy to end the conversation. You will have all these tricks, cues for you if you have access to the link that have been provided by the organizer. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Sylvain. That was some great information to support managers in dealing with some of the challenging conversations that they may encounter in the near future. And yes, we will have some information that we will share with our panel, with our participants afterwards. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Jean-François Claude, Senior Advisor, Workplace Mental Health with the Center of Expertise on Mental Health in the Workplace at TBS. Jean-François is also a certified psychological health and safety advisor through the Canadian Mental Health Association, with additional certifications in workplace mental health leadership from Queen's University and mental health first aid. He's an experienced bilingual keynote speaker, raising awareness on mental health and reducing the stigma of mental illness by sharing his own personal story of living with mental illness through over 200 engaging and inspiring mental health talks since 2014. Jean-François, can you share your thoughts, being a manager in your previous life, and as someone who understands mental health challenges firsthand, what are some important tips from your perspective that managers should understand when having challenging conversations with their employees?
Merci beaucoup, Marianne. And from the get-go, I just want to say that we've already heard some amazing, fantastic tips from both Beverly and Sylvain on how to have constructive conversations with colleagues on sometimes very difficult topics. So what I thought I would do this afternoon is maybe cover a little bit how managers can actually lay the groundwork ahead of time so that we put in place the winning conditions for being able to have psychologically safe conversations. Donc, pour établir ces conditions gagnantes au préalable, j'aimerais partager avec vous les 5 règles d'or pour les gestionnaires, un outil qui a été développé là, par nos collègues chez Environnement et Changement climatique Canada. Ces 5 règles sont 1. Établir un lien de confiance dès le départ. 2. Prôner des comportements sains et respectueux. 3. Écouter, observer et faire un suivi régulier. 4. Fournir un espace rassurant pour les discussions. Et 5e, éviter de poser un diagnostic et de toujours orienter les employés vers des professionnels. So I find that the 5 golden rules for managers, so that's a tool that was developed by Environment and Climate Change Canada, really presents a good framework to help you foster a psychologically safer and healthier work environment with the goal, obviously, to better support the mental health and well-being of your team. So those 5 rules, the first rule is establish connection and trust early. A small investment of your time upfront to get to know your colleagues, their values, their expectations, will pay dividends down the road. Donc, c'est vraiment aussi important d'apprendre à connaître vos collègues sur le plan humain d'abord et avant tout. The second rule, model healthy and respectful behaviors. When you lead by example, you are really setting the tone for the rest of your team. So it's important to, practice self-care, to really set the boundaries, to lead by example. Et ce que j'entends par ça, c'est d'une part, c'est de prendre soin de vous. Hein? On l'a entendu de Beverly, c'est très important de d'abord prendre soin de sa propre santé mentale afin de pouvoir être là pour les autres et les appuyer si eux sont aux prises avec une problématique de santé mentale. Donc, c'est important de vraiment être un modèle, un leader là, en termes de prendre vos pauses, prendre vos vacances, respecter les heures de travail, que ce soit vos heures de travail ou celles des membres de votre équipe. The third golden rule for managers is to listen, observe, and check in regularly. And this is especially critical in our current remote work environment. So it's important that you ask, your colleagues directly. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling today? How can I best support you? On a entendu parler de l'importance de l'écoute active. Donc, c'est important de pratiquer l'écoute active et ce, sans jugement. Hein? Dans le fond, l'objectif, c'est de rassurer ses employés que vous êtes là pour les appuyer quand ça va moins bien. Donc, engagez-vous à travailler avec eux pour trouver les solutions appropriées. Rule number 4, provide safe spaces for discussions. Now, perhaps, in our current situation, it's not so much about ensuring a physical space, but it's that psychological space. So provide options to your employees in terms of how, when, where to hold a discussion. Soyez attentifs à votre ton, mais aussi aux préjugés inconscients, surtout par rapport à la santé mentale. Donc, il faut être ouvert et réceptif aux commentaires et aux préoccupations de vos collègues. And finally, rule number 5, refrain from diagnosing and always refer employees to professionals. So our job really as managers isn't to diagnose employees, but to provide workplace supports as appropriate. Donc, c'est important de les référer aux professionnels de santé, que ce soit leur médecin, Ça peut être au programme d'aide aux employés, par exemple, à autres ressources qui sont disponibles au sein de la fonction publique ou même dans leur propre communauté. So by adhering to these 5 golden rules and integrating them into your daily management practices, you are establishing yourself as a psychologically safe leader. You are building that trust relationship needed for when those challenges and potential conflicts arise. And we can't underestimate the importance of practicing psychologically safe leadership because surveys conducted by a number of different Canadian mental health organizations have consistently shown that only about 1/3 of workers would feel comfortable raising a mental health concern with their manager. So the importance of establishing those trust relationships so that when concerns do arise, that there is a certain comfort level in sharing those with you. And, you know, I think what's also important to remember, I mean, we often hear in, you know, sort of mental health circles, that message, you know, you are not alone. And generally people take that to mean if you yourself are struggling with your mental health, there are supports available out there for you. But I would extend that to you as managers. You are not alone in handling these situations. There are resources available to you to help you prepare and plan for those conversations on difficult topics. It can be informal conflict management services, like we heard from Sylvain and some of the great tools that they have available, but also the employee assistance program isn't just for counseling for yourself necessarily, but as a manager, as a supervisor, you can certainly call EAP for some guidance or assistance in terms of how to approach certain conversations around mental health. Donc, c'est vraiment, je dirais que c'est très important de ne pas sous-estimer l'importance de votre appui envers un collègue aux prises avec un trouble de santé mentale. Et ce que j'aimerais faire peut-être, c'est partager avec vous un exemple concret là, tiré de mon propre vécu. So I was just saying that it's important not to underestimate the importance of the support that you can be providing as a manager. And I just want to take a brief moment to share, you know, one of my personal experiences to illustrate the point. So this would have been back in 2012, before we were really having conversations around mental health in the workplace, when I found myself going through a major depressive episode. So literally from one day to the next, I went from, you know, being a director and putting in 60-hour work weeks and go at work all the time to a sudden work stoppage from one day to the next. And as I'm going through this, you know, at my lowest points, you know, I was questioning everything around my role at work. It wasn't so much a question of when I'd be going back to work, but there were days when I was wondering if I'd be going back to work. What really helped me through all of this was my manager. And I want to share maybe a few things that she did that I thought was extremely helpful. So first of all, it was early in the sick leave that, you know, she reached out to me, and it wasn't the type of conversation along the lines of, you know, when are you coming back to the office? Quite the contrary. I was the one who kept turning the conversation around to what was happening at the office. And she stopped me in my tracks and she said, that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to check in on you, see how you are doing, right? Of course, we want you to come back to the office, but not until you are ready to come back. Your job right now is to focus on getting better. So from the get-go, you know, there was that support. And that was critical for me, who a big part of my identity was wrapped up in my job, and to have that come to a sudden stop was extremely challenging for me. The fact that she reached out, she asked for my permission to, you know, maintain contact throughout my sick leave. She asked me, you know, what methods of communication would work best for me. Was it better to have a regularly scheduled phone call or just an informal check-in by email to see if I was up to a phone conversation that day? So that to me was, you know, sending an important message that we would be collaborating together in terms of managing my sick leave and eventually my return to work. And so the second thing I thought that was very beneficial as well is she recognized that because of the conditions in the workplace, the factors at work that had not changed because of difficult relationships with our minister's office at the time, that I would probably not be returning to work anytime soon if I was thrown right back into the exact same circumstances, serving the same clients. So she essentially, talked to me about options and looking around an assignment. And again, that was critical, but it was only a bit later that really sort of came to light in terms of how supportive and helpful that was. Because initially my thought was, oh, here we go, right? I'm being shelved, I'm being parked because I wasn't able to cope or make it through it, through the challenges that existed in that workplace. But quite the contrary, as I was preparing to return to work, it became very clear that there was an acknowledgement that I was still able to make an important contribution to our department, just that I had to do it in a different role for health reasons. And so, we came to an agreement around an assignment, and I was given the tools that I needed in terms of accommodations, in terms of resources, to be able to continue to contribute at work once I was on the path to recovery. So I think it's important to note, that the importance that managers have in terms of playing that support role when an employee is struggling. In closing, I do want to mention a couple of things. Donc, il y a des ressources là, que nous avons développées au Centre d'expertise sur la santé mentale en milieu de travail, par anticipation là, de cette transition là, vers un milieu de travail hybride. So two tip sheets that were recently developed by our Center of Expertise. The first one being coping with changes in the workplace. So that really is a tip sheet intended for employees at all levels to help them manage any mental health concerns that they may be experiencing in the face of an eventual return to work sites, whether it's partial or a full return. And the second tip sheet, be a mental health leader, is aimed at managers, at supervisors, and using the word leader as an acronym for 6 tips that you can use to help support mental health in the workplace. Donc, ces fiches conseils seront partagées là, avec vous par courriel suivant la séance de cet après-midi. Donc, merci beaucoup de votre participation et au plaisir d'échanger avec vous lors de la période des questions. À vous la parole, Hélène. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean-François, for this, first of all, powerful testimonial. Et aussi pour avoir partagé les règles d'or qui sont si importantes et complémentent bien l'information qui ont été partagées par Beverly et Sylvain. Donc, l'importance de diriger avec compassion et compréhension, d'utiliser les services, les ressources qui sont disponibles pour vous en tant que gestionnaire. We will now open the floor for any questions you may have for any of our panelists. So I encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask your questions. And I see that we have already received a couple. So I'll go with the first one. Don't you have to be sincere when you are showing empathic in terms of vaccination and employment? When you know they will be put on leave without pay, as an example. When you know their fate is in your hands as a manager. So I don't know if someone wants to start answering this question.
That's a great question. And it's also very, very true. What I would say is, being empathetic means being genuine with the person. So you would need to share with them the fact that while you understand and you empathize with how they're feeling, so you're empathizing with their emotions, the fact that you are a manager means that you do have a mandate. And so you are going to have to make that decision and move forward. And it means being uncomfortable with them. It's going to be awkward and it's going to be difficult. And I think we need to kind of embrace the idea that we're going to be experiencing emotional ups and downs as managers for the next little while, because those people, the staff that are not getting vaccinated for whatever reason, they will need support as well. And so you as managers will need to kind of be in sort of two modes, if you will. be empathetic and open and validating person towards the employee's feelings, and at the same time saying, hey, you know, what's your decision? I have a deadline, you know, where are you in terms of your decision? And if they don't make the deadline, then you let them know, as much as I feel for you, I do have to move forward with what is required, because it's part of my job. So it's not easy. It's not easy. And this is why I'm saying, you know, please, you know, start working on your maintaining your self-care, because it's going to take its toll. It's going to require a lot more emotional work, I'm thinking, than managers might be used to doing, right, on a regular basis. So that's my my sort of input on that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Beverly. I don't know if Jean-François, Sylvain, do you have anything you'd like to add? Yes, Sylvain, go ahead.
As a nurse, we are genuine with our clients, but some clients may refuse to have the treatment. So do I cry with that client, or I say, you know what, I think that I explained to you what the illness is, what the treatment is, and what we would like to do. And by your own choice, you decide not to go the road that I suggested. So I'm so sorry. I could understand that you may be more sick, or maybe in pain, but that is now in your hand. And it's not that I don't care, it's just that my job is to do this. So, and it's hard as a human being to see somebody just say, my personal values maybe bring me here, but that's in your hand. So my personal values, it's not what I'm going to discuss with you today, but I'm in my mandate, in my position. My role and responsibilities are, which is very hard sometimes. You may look emotional-less, which is not. It's just that I try to frame my mind to the task at hand.
Thank you, Sylvain.
Yeah, I would maybe just add to that. I'm focusing on the last part of that question. When you know their fate is in your hands as a manager. And I would suggest to you that, no, you need to sort of reframe that thinking, as Danielle was, as Sylvain was suggesting earlier. Your role is to merely apply the policy that was decided elsewhere, and ultimately you have presented them with options, and it's up to them to choose those options. So I think, sometimes we're very hard on ourselves as managers, and I think, the importance of that self-care as well, taking that reflection time to perhaps reframe the situation in terms of what your role actually is in those circumstances. And I'll just add too, because I'm seeing a couple of comments about the tip sheets. The links will be shared with all participants after the session. If I do get a chance, I may just pop them into the chat as well. Thanks.
Thank you. So next question here, can you please provide an example of an exit strategy from a conversation on a difficult topic?
Yes, first, the parameters that you set at the beginning of the conversation. As an example, I would like to have a respectful conversation. If you feel that the person is less respectful than you thought, or do show some behaviors that are not acceptable, then you just state, okay, I see what's happening in front of me. And you remember, I say that I may end the meeting if this is there, and I think that this is there now. What do you think? That's the first thing. Behaviors, if there's unacceptable behaviors, that's your first exit door. It could be, yes, we had an hour to talk about it, and there's no new information since 10 minutes, or seems to repeating the same thing, and I think everything has been said for now. Can we set another meeting? Because we're gonna meet the 60 minutes meeting that we have. There's many ways for you, but that's why you need to be prepared. The what if is, I'll go out of that room if A, B, C, and D. And with my experience, if you say I have a 60 minutes meeting, usually you can set the meeting within 40 minutes. The last 20 minutes is to summarize, to give the homeworks, what will be the follow-ups. After 40 minutes, usually people repeat themselves. So this is where you can say, okay, this is, and the paraphrasing to say, okay, this is, have been already mentioned. Is there anything new to add? No? Okay, so let's set this meeting off, and then we're going to argue if there's something, we're going to discuss later if there's something new. So there's these ways to end a meeting. I hope I've been clear, sorry.
I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add to this question, Jean-François or Beverly. If not, we can go to the next question that we have in the chat. Donc, la prochaine question dans le chat. Oups, elle vient de bouger. Je pense qu'elle a quelques thumbs up, ce qui est bon. Pour avoir été dans une situation similaire à Jean-François Claude, j'aurais catégoriquement refusé de parler à mon gestionnaire pendant mon congé. Comment peut-on être sûr que le problème de l'employé en congé, ce n'est pas nous, pour pouvoir aider l'employé?
Merci beaucoup de cette question. Écoutez, d'une part, je pense que c'est une question d'avoir établi au préalable cette relation-là, hein, quand j'ai parlé des 5 règles d'or, mais de façon plus pratico-pratique, rien n'empêche qu'avec votre équipe, que vous développiez un petit protocole là, en termes de, dans une situation où ce que vous vous retrouvez en congé, comment est-ce que vous voulez avoir ou recevoir des communications du bureau? Est-ce qu'il y a une personne de confiance en milieu de travail avec qui vous préféreriez transiger lorsque vous êtes en congé de maladie? Donc, il y a des choses qu'on peut faire d'avance là pour être dans cette position-là où ce que c'est pas nécessairement juste aux gestionnaires là, nécessairement de faire ces démarches-là. Et ça peut être une consultation aussi avec les relations de travail, dépendamment de l'organisation pour laquelle vous travaillez. Il y a peut-être certains processus qui sont déjà en place là, pour ce genre de situation-là. Mais rien n'empêche de vraiment, pour répéter là, en anglais peut-être, the importance here is that, you know, nothing prevents you as a leader, as a team manager, to establish in advance, you know, what are the protocols of communication in a situation where one of your employees is off on leave. So you can ask them that question. Is it okay, you know, if I'm the one who reaches out to you, or is there somebody else on the team that you would prefer be sort of your point of contact with the office when you're on leave? So that can be sort of established ahead of time. Merci.
Thank you, merci. Anyone else wants to add to that? Or we can go to the next question with Marianne.
Okay, so next question. It can be challenging to support employees' mental health in an environment where senior management does not prioritize or understand how to support mental health. What advice do you have for managers struggling in such environments?
If I may. We all have first aid kits at work. Why not having a first mental health kit at work? It means that if somebody's struggling with some mental health issues or just being depressed or being always feeling angry, we may want to have what are the resources that we do have in the community around. If you work in Montreal, it's easy, but if you work in Port-Cartier, you may need to know better your resources. So as a manager, having that first mental health kit may help you to solve few situations.
I just wanted to add something to that, and I'm going to do a little bit of a plug for EAPs here, but I know that EAPs offer support to managers on how to have discussions with employees, as well as how to have discussions with senior management when it comes to mental health issues in the workplace. So I would suggest, you know, if you've got EAP, just reach out and try to do that kind of discussion and connection and see if you can have a conversation. It may mean going about it differently in terms of, you know, doing presentations on different topics. You know, there can be some strategies that you can use if you're not getting the support that you need directly from senior management. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I mean, to Beverly's point, I think that's excellent. Remember, you're not alone in this, right? There are resources you can tap into. Some departments and agencies have an ombudsman's office or an ombudsperson's office specific for mental health and well-being. So that might be an avenue to pursue. And look, I certainly appreciate and I see you, you know, as managers, you're kind of the ham in the sandwich in many respects between, you know, your team and senior management. You know, I think it's important to remember that there are certain things that are within your control, certain things are in your, you know, sphere of influence, and there are some things that are completely out of your control. What you can control is how you lead by example within your own team, how you do, you know, frequent check-ins with your team members, how you support them when they are struggling. But again, in a situation where you may not feel supported, remember there are resources like EAP, not just for you as a manager, but for you as an employee as well, who may be struggling and looking for strategies in how to approach whatever the situation is. Merci.
Okay, I'll go to another question. To add on to a question that was previously asked, if the employee is not disrespectful, but crying or very emotional, I don't want to end the call or the meeting and leave them in a mental state, even though we're not getting anywhere. So any suggestions for that? Or somebody who would like to start? Beverly?
Yes, I think if the employee is you know, quite upset in your office and you have a deadline, you have a time frame, I would, like Jean-François offered earlier, maybe check in with another teammate, somebody else on your team that can be of support, of immediate support to that staff member. And after that, if that's not something that's possible, definitely letting the employee know, listen, I care about you. Why don't you, you know, go maybe to the bathroom, pull yourself together for a bit, and let them know that, you know, I'm here. I need to move on to whatever else you have to move on to. But, you know, making sure that they are safe, like they're not at risk for harming themselves. Again, reaching out to EAP if it's a moment of distress that is well beyond anything that you imagined and anything that you think can calm down in the moment. But I think having a little bit of a buddy system where another staff member can sort of come in and be of support might be the first point that I would recommend that you do. So like Jean-François was saying earlier, maybe establishing that in the beginning with your teams and then moving on from using it in that moment. I hope that makes sense.
And
sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say very quickly, and the other thing too is you as managers, it's important for you to have a buddy manager as well. That peer support can certainly be helpful. Maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a fellow manager in the same department, or maybe it's just a few managers in other departments that you have prior relationships with, and say, look, I'm faced with this situation. What would you do, right? So don't discount, again, going back to that message, you are not alone, right? So there's informal supports and there's formal supports that are available to you. So I would certainly encourage you to explore that and maybe establish sort of that, manager peer circle with whom you can work through some of these situations.
Et souvent, la personne elle-même sait ce dont elle a besoin. So ask her, what do you need now? I see you crying over and over. Is there anything I can do? Sometimes they may say, oh, I just need 15, 20 minutes for myself. Okay, I'll be checking out. I will be checking in, sorry. And you may have somebody, I have to leave, but she's in my office. Please make sure that you looked at her, please. And be respectful that some people may need 20 minutes for just to get back to a nice ground.
Yeah, I think, Sylvain, thank you for that. People were saying, what about remote work? And I think that could work as well. If the person needs a few minutes to themselves, I'm going to check in with you in 15 minutes, or, call me back in 15 minutes and let me know how you're doing. I have to go, that kind of thing. And then also getting another coworker, just sending an email or a message to another coworker to say, hey, can you just check in with so-and-so? They might need some support.
I would like to add to that this morning I had a situation similar than this one, and everybody was shy to call the emergency contact that we do have in PeopleSoft. And I say, how come? If he was about to do an infarct, we will have called that phone number. How come? Because he's crying and he's angry that we're not calling that person. So just that we may have to look at these emergency phone numbers. And as Jean-François said, it is setting up the rules that we need before getting in this situation. Having these first mental health kits, maybe, is there somebody that can reach out for you if you need?
Great responses to that question, and I find that often we want to fix things, right? And it's uncomfortable when somebody's crying, but sometimes that's just what they need, right? They need to let that out. And again, very challenging situations for you managers to be in. So thank you for those great responses. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. The NMC will be posting the video on YouTube and distributing that link if you'd like to watch again, or if you'd like to share it with your colleagues. We also ask that you watch for the feedback form from the NMC, and we appreciate if you could fill that out. If there's any questions that we weren't able to get to, or if you have any outstanding questions, feel free to forward them to the NMC mailbox. That's going to be posted in the chat there, and we'll do our best to have our experts answer them, and it'll be posted on our GC Connects page, along with the resources from our panelists. Remember, utilize these confidential consultation services from EAP and ICMS. Again, the links are in our chat there. You can find which EAP and ICMS you have at your organization or agency. Helen and I would like to thank our panelists, Beverly, Sylvain, and Jean-François, for joining us today and providing such invaluable information. We want to thank our team at the NMC, our friends from the Federal Youth Network for assisting with all the behind the scenes of this virtual talk. And thank you for all joining us today and participating in this event.
Donc, merci à tous d'avoir participé à la séance d'aujourd'hui. We hope you will have time to sit in on some of the other breakout sessions of the NMC Symposium. Je vous invite donc fortement à nous suivre sur Twitter et Facebook et à consulter nos bulletins d'information pour obtenir toutes les mises à jour ainsi que les détails relatifs à l'inscription. Until next time, best wishes et bonne fin de journée. À la prochaine.